Welcome back to Renewable Rides. Today's episode is a highlight from one of my favorite conversations. Our conversation with my co-host, Gareth Evans, about the launch of his book, Powering Profits. Gareth spent nearly 2 years writing this book, pulling on over 2 decades of experience driving real energy change for businesses. It's a practical, no-jargon guide for business leaders on how to control energy costs, build resilience, and gain a lasting competitive advantage, whether you're managing a single site or a massive property portfolio. It's not a technical manual or a sustainability manifesto. It's a playbook, one that Gareth Thomas, VP of Asset Management for Energy, Renewables, and Sustainable Initiatives at Public Storage, called, quote, the playbook he wishes he had 4 years ago when he began their onsite renewables journey. In this conversation, we get into why Gareth wrote the book, including the story from his time in Iraq that shaped how he thinks about energy and resilience, who the book is really for, and the 3-part framework, challenging limits, adapting purposely, and empowering co-creation, that walks readers from status quo to action. Powering Profits is available now on Amazon, and you can learn more at VECKTA.com/poweringprofits. That's VECKTA.com/powering-profits. Here's my conversation with Gareth. Welcome back to Renewable Rides. And today, I'm joined as always by my co-host, Gareth Evans. But this episode's a little bit different because we're not here to talk with a guest or talk about the next energy trend. We're here to talk about something Gareth has been quietly building behind the scenes alongside everything else we do here at VECKTA. Gareth's written a book. It's called Powering Profits. Control energy costs, build resilience, and gain a lasting competitive advantage. And it publishes on today, which is the day we're publishing this episode, May 19th. I've had the privilege of watching this come together, and it's a complete articulation of how to approach the planning, procuring, and deploying of on-site energy with a single site or across a huge portfolio of properties. And it's not a technical manual. It's not a sustainability manifesto. It's a practical, straightforward guide for business leaders who know energy is becoming a real problem and want a clear path forward. The testimonial from Gareth Thomas, VP of Asset Management at Public Storage, speaks to that. He said after reading an early copy that this is the playbook he wishes he had 4 years ago when he began their on-site renewables journey. The steps are clear, practical, and easy to follow, regardless of prior experience in energy, solar, or renewables. We're going to talk about the content, why Gareth wrote it, who it's for, and what he hopes it does for the people that read it. Welcome to your own podcast.
It's great to be here, Dan. It's good to see you.
Let's get after it. You've been doing this for gosh, feels like approaching 2 years now. Maybe a little longer. I know that the content that you've written about has been coming together for largely your whole professional career. So maybe start at the beginning. Take us back to kind of what prompted you to want to write the book, and why is now the right time, and then we can get into some of the content.
Yeah, we're in a new paradigm, Dan, and I think it's becoming more evident to people all of the time. And I'm actually glad that it took 2 years to write the book, because I think the industry and the market has moved so much in the last 2 years, and it's been so dynamic that I think if we'd have published this 2 years ago, we wouldn't have had good granular data. We wouldn't have had insights into how vulnerable the grid is. We wouldn't have seen these rapidly escalating energy costs. And I don't think the AI wave had really hit us that has brought energy, in fact, into mainstream media. And so the real reason for writing the book is to, none of us really have energy acumen. Like, none of us needed it. Like, it literally showed up when we wanted it. It was affordable. Sustainability was kind of a branding expectation that we thought kind of the grid would deliver on. And so we did some energy efficiency measures and called it good. And that new paradigm has completely changed, hasn't it? Where now our operations are vulnerable, where we need to hedge against rising energy costs, because energy makes up 5 to 40% of our operational costs. And without it, we actually don't operate at all. And so the motivation is to continue to build on the great work we've been doing with the podcast, with our website, with our articles, with the Substack, to really document, here is the situation today, here's the risk of the status quo, here's what's possible, and then here's how you can execute against that. And so, yeah, very excited to share that, get everyone's feedback, and really collaborate with this awesome industry and our customers and our suppliers to continue to drive great outcomes. Because by the book title, this is about truly powering profits, and profits going beyond P&L profits. This is good for business, good for economy, good for society, and then we all benefit.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're absolutely right. The world has changed so much in the last 2 years since you first started putting pen to paper. But the thing that I like about the book the most is generally everything that you cover is evergreen content. And there's certainly some things that I'm sure changed from when you started writing 2 years ago to what the final version is that our listeners are going to be able to read. But who knows? Maybe in 2 years' time, we're going to have to put out a new revision with all the things that have changed. But I think the core of what you've written about will still ring true and still be something that people can action upon. And I think one of the things that you touched on there in the opening is that without power or electricity or energy, nothing happens. And so you open the book with a very vivid story from your time in Iraq. And you and I have talked about this a lot. We haven't talked about it a ton with our listeners, but maybe you can share a little bit about your experience in Iraq, you having to experience mortar attacks and really why you started the book there and how that impacted how you view the world and energy within the world.
Yeah, I think super fascinating part of my career, spending 2 years in Iraq. That was the real catalyst for what we do today. And it really became apparent to me, we never think about where our energy comes from, do we? We flick the switch and we think it's coming from somewhere local. But the reality is, at the time, this was the end of the Gulf War. We'd fought a war in the Middle East for many years. And I was supporting the oil and gas industry to move into the region. And for sure, we need oil and gas. And it's a very precious commodity. But the thought of us extracting it from essentially still a semi-active war zone, piping it to a port, putting it on a ship, sailing it halfway around the world, because at the time, US was a mass importer of energy, and, putting it into a power plant, burning it to then send energy down these massive long transmission lines. It didn't make any sense to me. And, I start the book by sharing that most of our evenings were actually spent lying on a shipping container floor, which were our makeshift bedrooms, staring our buddies in the eye, kind of hoping that this wasn't the last evening. And the reality was, the real kind of turning point for me was, these weren't crazed insurgents. In one of our security briefings, because we had to have a security briefing every morning, it was shared with us a video of several individuals launching one of these mortars. And these were essentially like you and I, Dan, wanting to care for our families, wanting to put food on the table. In their case, wanting to put probably diesel in their generators because they're surviving on 2 hours of power a day because their energy infrastructure being decimated. And to earn money, what the US military was telling us was these were individuals just being paid to launch mortars into the base. And so it showed me how vital energy is to everything we do. Without it, we can't run businesses. We can't run air conditioning. We can't pump water. We can't have education, and society just crumbles. And I don't think people realize that matter of fact. And it feels like the US is light years away from that experience, but it's not. We're experiencing outages every single week, and communities are without power for minutes, hours, days, weeks at a time. And life can deteriorate very quickly from being an inconvenience to being a massive safety issue to being a massive drag on the economy. And so I wanted to kind of highlight that this may be an extreme scenario, but it's what drove my mission And if we don't do something about it and we don't have energy as something within our control, then bad outcomes come about. And so, yeah, it's now a fun story to look back on, but yeah, genuinely suffered from a bit of anxiety and PTSD for a little while after that. But it's what got us here, and we need to embrace these opportunities. And I'm glad I went through that, because we wouldn't be here today without it.
It is so interesting. And one of the things as you were sharing that I reflect on is this notion that there's so many proponents out there that say that we need the oil and gas infrastructure because it's firm power and it's reliable power. And yes, assuming you have the fuel,
Yeah.
it is, right? If you have the fuel to put in a generator, to put in a turbine, whatever it is absolutely, arguably the firmest resource. That said, when the supply chains crumble, and we're seeing it play out in real time as we speak over the last couple months, it doesn't become as reliable. It becomes, in some cases, it could be intermittent, or it becomes, you and I were just talking the other day, how, a barrel of oil could start to push into the 140s, 150s. I've been reading reports that depending on how long this drags out, it could, and how much reserves are getting tapped into it, could start pushing above 200. And that could start to mean that it's unaffordable for some folks.
Yeah.
And so, it's the most complex machine man has ever built, which is the electric grid, and the supply chain around it is hands down the most complex thing in the world.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? This Iran situation kind of just brings back so many realities of, we think it's all good, and then, and the comment around, but now the US is a net exporter. This is a global market. And unless suddenly Exxon and Chevron are mandated to not export any fuel, they're going to play the market, and they're going to charge what they can charge. And that makes it expensive for all of us.
Well, you and I are both, I would argue, action-oriented. So rather than talking about all the reasons that we've got a fragile system, let's take matters into our own hands and get after it. So who did you write the book for? And if you were to envision when you were spending the early mornings and late nights writing this, who did you vision sitting down, reading this book, and being able to take something from it?
Yeah, it's for the business leaders, the boards, the CEOs, the CFOs, the frontline operators, the real estate leaders, the supporting functions, the legal, the procurement. This is their guide to what is possible and how to execute. This is not necessarily written for the energy industry, which can sometimes be an echo chamber of all the things we should or could be doing. This is genuinely for the people who are passionate about running their business, running it super efficiently, maximizing profits, doing it in the most sustainable and reliable way that they can, and building incredible brands that, by taking energy into their control today, they create decades and decades of value for their company. And so this is to help them overcome the status quo, to understand what's possible, and then figure out how to get there.
Well, so one of the things that you and I often hear when we're speaking with customers, for those that have not yet done anything, they in some cases are a bit in that analysis paralysis stage of, where do I even start? How do I get going? How do I get the momentum building within my organization to do this, even if they see the challenges and the rising costs and everything? Or we're working with folks that have done a handful of projects, but maybe they've gotten bumps, gotten bruises along the way, or they're just getting pressed by others within the organization of, is this really, yielding the results we were hoping for? But for those that are either stuck or to start the journey, or stuck after doing a couple projects, how do you address some of these challenges in the book?
Yeah. So the book breaks it down into 3 core areas actually that align with our core values. So the first is challenging limits. So this is all about understanding, where are we today? What is the status quo? What are the risks of doing nothing? And I'd love to tell a story of what happens when you do nothing. In the book, I talk about a manufacturing company in the Northeast that we supported several years ago, Dan, really forward-thinking energy professional who wanted to analyze what was possible for one of their facilities. And we were able to show them that with a combination of ground mount and carport solar paired with a battery, they could reduce their grid consumption by 49%. And at that time, that was equivalent to like $100,000 just shy of a month, so $1.2 million a year. But the organization couldn't internally align. And so then the project stalled. And since then, rates have gone up 26%. So if they deployed that system, which would have paid for itself in, I think at the time it was 2 to 3 years, they'd now be saving $1.8 million a year. They wouldn't be at the mercy of the escalating utility rates. And this is just one site. And they have a global portfolio, like 600 sites. And so this is the reality of, the risk of doing nothing is it erodes the value of your business significantly. So then we go to adapt purposely. So now this is about how do you align your internal stakeholders? How do you set that vision of what you want to achieve? And this isn't like weeks and months of strategy sessions and over engineering it. It's simply like, what is our priority? Is it cost? Is it resilience? Is it sustainability? What do we want to try and achieve? Let's now baseline our portfolio and understand, where are we consuming energy? Where is it most expensive? Where are we most vulnerable to escalations and outages? And really understanding like, what is the risk you're facing? And then systematically, these are very customized systems for a good reason, because every facility has its own unique tariff structure, has its own unique energy input cost, its own load profile, its own supplier network within reason, its own financing opportunities. So what do you then build at what facilities, and how do you then go about buying that system? And so we talk through all of the elements of visioning, planning, assessing, designing, understanding your financial options, which is super important, obviously, for a CFO. Very often we hear, don't we, Dan, is like, I'm competing for capital. How do I convey a business case that will resonate? And maybe you actually don't even need to compete for capital. You have options to get loans, to get energy as a service contracts. So we talk through all of that. And then the final section is empowering co-creation, because this is not a one-person sport. This is truly a team sport. And it requires us to socialize this, get all the stakeholders on the same page, have a single source of truth, have a repeatable process, have something that is robust and that allows you to scale with confidence. And so what's fun about it is try to remove all the jargon, make it super understandable, use the road trip analogy throughout the book, draw on elements of that around, you need your Google Maps equivalent. You know what your destination is, but what route do you take? What happens if there's a roadblock along the way? Do you want the scenic journey? Do you want the most efficient journey? So it's all about kind of making it fun, making it understandable, and making it actionable for people ultimately.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.